Hey, good morning. How are you doing, girl? Are you in there somewhere? Are you back behind that screen? Hello? As the computer screen is making your face glow, I can see it. Or at least I can imagine it in my mind's eye. So I hope you're doing well. Today is the 20th of November. So Thanksgiving, 2018. So Thanksgiving is just around the corner. And so today's Tuesday, and Thanksgiving is day after tomorrow. So, looking forward to that day. Gonna hang out with some friends, I think, in San Luis Obispo, and that should be fun. I hope you're having a really enjoyable fall vacation from school. And I've been thinking about spending a lot of time reading Harry Potter this vacation. I just picked up an audiobook, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And I'm listening to that right now. I think I'm on chapter 5 right now in my car. I'm listening to it in my car. Now, I did already listen to Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone about a month or so ago. And I'm really enjoying the audiobook series. I I am setting up a goal of listening to all the Potter stories on audiobook. So I'm really looking forward to it. The other day, it occurred to me that one of the reasons I like the Harry Potter series is because it relates to Harry Potter going to school. And for some reason, I had this real interest in school, college. And I'm now high school. I guess it is kind of like a high school, Harry Potter's Wizarding World. I think he does go, is it high school or I think it might be high school. Anyway, it has a school setting, and for some reason, school settings are really compelling to me. I'm an advocate for education. I enjoy school myself. In fact, this semester I was thinking about being a part-time college student. At the same time, I was working full-time. So that sounds like fun to me. That's a subject that's interesting to me, and how Harry Potter gets along with his his co-students. So I'm enjoying Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I'm also reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the book. And I have an interest in seeing the new movie. It just came out, Fantastic Beasts. It's the sequel to the first one. The first one was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and the second one is Fantastic Beasts, something like The Reward of Grindelwald or something like that. I forget what it is. But it's playing in theaters right now, and that's interesting to me. So I'm looking forward to spending some time in Harry Potter world. And what's interesting is I think I might be compelled to buy the soundtracks for the movies because I like listening to the music. Now, the music is basically classical music. you know, it's music of the age, and so I've been enjoying that kind of classical music lately. So anyway, I went to the library yesterday and picked up a few books. Now, you might have recognized last time I was somewhat dissatisfied with Mary Mackenzie's Peaceful Living book. My critique of it, well, partly was that it just didn't have the quality that I was looking for, and in terms of the content. And so I'm getting some new books, and while I was in the library, I was in the psychology section, of course, and I ran across this amazing book, and I'm starting to read it already. Let's see, can you see it? It's called The Story of Psychology, and it essentially is a history of psychology. It is a huge book. It's like 3 inches, 3 inches thick or more, but it goes through all the history of psychology, the developmentalists, the social psychologists, the cognitivists, the psychotherapists, and Psychology Today. I mean, wow. So I'm excited about reading this book. And it goes from the beginning, from Socrates, Plato, Descartes, Spinoza, all the way to modern day psychologists. So hooray for that. Really looking forward to digesting that book. That may take a while to digest. While I was at the library, I picked up what I think might be a possible replacement for the Mary Mackenzie book. And it's this one. It's called Penates, Extraordinary Origins of Everyday Things. You know, Emily, when I was your age, I actually had this book. I owned this book. And part of the reason I owned it was because as a kid, I was kind of interested in trivia. I was interested in widening my knowledge of the world as much as I could. And I would read like these pocket encyclopedias and these pocket factoid books, and I got a lot of pleasure from it, partly because they were salt and pepper for my conversations. I was able to throw these interesting trivial facts into my conversations, and my conversations would suddenly get interesting. And so I really found that to be useful, and I figured I'd take a look at this same book again as an older person and see if I still enjoyed it. Now, this book is about origins, and Thanksgiving is coming up, so I thought that we ought to talk a little bit about the origin of Thanksgiving, of course, which is happening in 2 days. And I think, now in my mind, Thanksgiving has this mythical quality. It has this legendary quality. And so I also have a sense that, since it didn't start that long ago, I think we still have historical records of some of the objective facts relating to the Thanksgiving holiday celebration. So that is excellent. So it's kind of neat to have the situation where we've got the facts and we've got the legend. And let's do a little bit of comparison and contrasting. Why don't we? So I'm excited about this. Let's read on. So here I am in this book, Penates, Extraordinary Origins of Everyday Things, and I'm here at the entry of Thanksgiving, 1621, Plymouth, Massachusetts. So I want to get into the mood here. The 1621, imagine 1621. Now we're 2018 right now, so 1621 is about just shy of 400 years ago. Oh man, you are kidding me. 400 years ago. Now, that in my mind is kind of a long time ago. So, it's at the beginning of the Western discovery of the American continent, the North American continent. So this happens in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I have never visited Plymouth, Massachusetts. I'll have to make a point of it. All right, so here we go. I'll just read a few paragraphs. We'll see where it takes us. Though the Pilgrims held the first Thanksgiving dinner, our celebration of the holiday today is due in large part to the tireless efforts of 19th century female editor of a popular ladies' magazine. The 102 pilgrims who sailed on board the Mayflower, fleeing religious oppression, were well acquainted with annual Thanksgiving Day celebrations. The custom was ancient and universal. The Greeks had honored Demeter, goddess of agriculture. The Romans had paid tribute to Ceres, the goddess of corn, while the Hebrews had offered thanks for abundant harvests with the 8-day Feast of Tabernacles. These customs had never really died out in the Western world. Whoa! Wow! That is such an eye-opening statement. The Feast of Tabernacles. That's funny. I kind of grew up Christian, and we talked about the Feast of Tabernacles, I think, on a few occasions. I never really made the connection between that and Thanksgiving. Wow. And then Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. Romans paid tribute to Ceres, the goddess of corn. Well, that is fascinating. Agriculture and corn play a really strong role in Thanksgiving. Yeah, particularly corn. In fact, I have corn in my home as a decoration in honor of this Thanksgiving season. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, I think it's amazing. The Pilgrims, after a 4-month journey that began in Holland. I didn't know that the Pilgrim journey began in Holland. Landed at Plymouth on December 11th, 1620. Confronted with severe weather and a plague that killed hundreds of local Indians, they had, by the fall of 1621, lost 46 of their own members. Whoa. So they had 102. They lost 46 of their members in death. Wow, that's like 50%. Well, that is 50%. That is about 50% of their population after traveling from Holland. So they essentially were decimated. I mean, imagine 100 people I can imagine surviving in a small community, but 50? Now things are starting to get desperate. 50 is, I mean, it's a lot of people, but it's not a whole lot of people. Wow. And the local Indians, they've been killed too through disease. Okay. Oh, fascinating. It seems that confronted with severe weather and a plague that killed hundreds of local Indians, they had, by the fall of 1621, lost 46 of their own members. And here's comma, mainly to scurvy and pneumonia. Now, I know scurvy is a lack of vitamin C. So they were really hungry for citrus. They needed that citrus that they weren't getting. And pneumonia. Oh yeah, I had pneumonia when I was 24 years old, or maybe I was like maybe 25 years old. Oh man, it was rough. I've got pneumonia. I've taken pneumonia vaccines in the meantime because I want to steer clear of that disease. That is one rough disease. That's very, very risky disease to have. The survivors, though, had something to be thankful for. Oh, that's for sure. A new and bountiful crop had been harvested. Food was abundant, and they were alive in large part thanks to the assistance of one person, an English-speaking Patuxet Indian named Squanto, who was to stay by their side until his death 2 years later. Oh, golly. Okay, so much death and dying. Can you imagine this group of travelers coming from Holland? Imagine your family just cut in half. You know, I can imagine they were all very close to one another, and to have half of them die. And then, thankfully, you build an alliance with a local Indian who happens to know English, called Squanto, or named Squanto, and then he dies 2 years later. So much death. Oh my gosh. You know, no wonder families were, men and women, couples had big families because imagine how unpredictable circumstances were that, you could lose just half of them from scurvy and pneumonia. Any old sniffle could be a problem. As a boy, Squanto had been captured by explorers to America and sold into slavery in Spain. He escaped to England, spent several years working for a wealthy merchant, and considerably anglicized, returned to his native Indian village just 6 months before the Pilgrims landed. He had helped them build houses and to cultivate crops of corn and barley. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims elected a new governor, William Bradford, and proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving in their small town, which had severe which had 7 private homes and 4 communal buildings. Wow. So, first of all, I have tasted corn. Corn tastes great. I have a feeling, though, that the corn of 400 years ago didn't quite taste as good as the sweet corn we have today. And I have eaten barley before, too. And let me tell you, there is nothing special about barley. You have to kind of be in the mood for it. Now, barley can be special if it's seasoned well. But what I mean by nothing special is that it doesn't have a real strong flavor. It's quite a neutral flavor, which can be good from a culinary standpoint. It can accept a lot of different seasonings and spices. Well, anyway, I think I'm going to stop right there. Well, no, let me continue. According to Governor Bradford's own history of Plymouth Plantation and celebration, lasted of Plymouth Plantation, the celebration lasted 3 days. Thanksgiving lasted 3 days. And today it lasts about 3 days too. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, typically, because it abuts a weekend. He said 4 men fowling, and the ducks and geese they brought back were added to lobsters, clams, bass, corn, green vegetables, and dried fruit. Okay, well, that seafood aspect of Thanksgiving has not been transmitted over the last 400 years. Lobsters, clams, and bass, that is very new information. It may be the case that there are families who celebrate Thanksgiving using lobsters, clams, and bass, but I'm not that familiar, and at least not on the West Coast. Not that I'm aware of. Now, corn, green vegetables, and dried fruit, yeah. Dried fruit is used mainly in the form of mincemeat pies. Yeah. The Pilgrims invited the chief of the Wampanoag tribe, Massasoit, and 90 of his braves, and the work of preparing the feast for 91 Indians and 56 settlers fell to only 4 Pilgrim women and 2 teenage girls. 13 women had died the previous winter. Okay, so essentially the same tradition holds true, where we have 1 or 2 people, and typically the mothers, preparing Thanksgiving dinner for a host of people, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. So that is actually very common today. That workload, and it's funny how that workload has sort of been maintained. How odd it is that is also the case. In the future, we're going to have robots and artificial intelligence prepare all of our food. So the Thanksgiving of the future is going to change pretty radically, I think. All right, actually right now, quite often, restaurants and grocery stores prepare the food that people eat. Yeah. So that is amazing. So the number of braves that arrived were 91 Indians and 56 settlers. So this was a really large feast. 91 and 56. So, that's basically 150 people. 150 people is a lot of guests at their feast, which lasted 3 days. And it's amazing to me that just 4 women and 2 teenage girls attempted to prepare it all. I have a feeling that things were a lot more relaxed back then. Today, people expect to eat, over a period of 3 to 4 hours in a person's home. And I think the standards are a little higher for cooking today too, probably. So the first Thanksgiving Day had all the elements of modern celebration, only on a smaller scale. A parade of soldiers, blasting muskets, trumpeting bugles, was staged by Captain Miles Standish, later to be immortalized in Longfellow's The Courtship of Miles Standish. The 90 Indian braves competed against the settlers in foot races and jumping matches, And after the Indians displayed their accuracy with bow and arrow, the white men with guns exhibited their own breed of marksmanship. So, this tradition of, say, a joining of sort of a celebration between, say, the Native American peoples and the Pilgrims clearly was real. And I'm glad to know that this cooperation between the peoples was as real as it is, or as real as it was. And so I'm glad that part of the legend is true. And I'm also interested in the games that they played. They practiced, they competed against one another using running races and jumping games. And they had little parades, not a little parade, but a little parade with muskets and firing of muskets and some sharpshooting with bows and arrows and rifles. So amazing stuff happened 400 years ago during the 1620s. Yeah, 1620, Plymouth, Massachusetts. So one thing I'm struck about that story is the death and the dying, the pneumonia, the scurvy, Squanto and his death, the sheer carnage of death, so powerful. We don't have that kind of scourge these days, except for maybe car accidents and maybe mass shootings. We don't see that kind of carnage today, thankfully. Boy, I cannot believe, wow, what an amazing story. I mean, I'm just blown away by it. It is no mystery to me why this day wasn't viewed as something special and carried on from generation to generation. I mean, that sounds like a significant day. 3 days of celebration. And, I would be interested to know about about the origins of Thanksgiving. It's interesting that even that holiday was borrowed from, say, the Feast of Tabernacles and worship of the god Ceres and what was the other one? The god of corn, and then the god of agriculture, which was Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. So fascinating stuff. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'm going to, like I mentioned, try to spend as much of it in Harry Potter world as I can. I'm also possibly considering going to Disneyland, so we'll see how that works out. Here's the thing too. Over the last few weeks, I've been pretty active doing stuff, and it would also be nice for me to get some laundry done and to do some organizing around the house and some cleaning. That is something that would be good for me. All right, so let's move on to the next segment, and that segment involves a question and answer period. So the purpose of the question and answer period is for you to get to know me a little bit better, to know about my experiences in life, and just to give you a little background about where you come from and who your dad is, things like that. These are essentially questions that you might have asked but haven't or didn't have the opportunity to ask me. And so now I'm going to immortalize them on YouTube. All right, here we go. So, question number. What's the next question? So the last question that I answered was, do you get drunk? How often? And I say, no, I don't drink. So, I don't get drunk. I don't drink. And, this is a really good time for me to go into my talk about alcohol. Now, and this is just off the top of my head. These are just some ideas I have about alcohol. In general, I believe that I have an anti-addictive personality. When I notice that I'm getting addicted to something is taking inordinate control over my life, I shut it down. At least that's one of my tendencies. And so the talk about alcohol mirrors some talk I have about any other addictive substances, like caffeine, for example, and certainly nicotine. So I stay away from basically drugs. I do, just as a general rule. Certainly street drugs, because, well, they're illegal. And also, they're not good for you. And, they don't promote health and well-being. And, I am a person who's focused on maintaining their health, physical and mental health. And so it just doesn't make any sense for me. And the same is true with caffeine. No interest in going there. When I was a college student, I would drink coffee that was caffeinated, and I would drink Coca-Cola to stay up at night sometimes so that I could do homework and cram for exams. I value those experiences, but that isn't something that I'd like to relive. And when I was in college too, I really didn't drink very much, but there was a time where I drank, I purchased a carafe of wine from the grocery store and maybe a 6-pack of beer or something, and put it in my refrigerator. I was never really a big fan of those drinks, so it never really caught on for me. Here's the thing about alcoholic drinks is that, at least back when I was growing up, they didn't taste very good. And I think to some extent they are an acquired taste. So that is what I would call a barrier to entry when it comes to alcohol. And the same is true with smoking cigarettes. There's a barrier to entry. Yesterday, I went to the doctor, visit a doctor's appointment, just a standard checkup. And this person beside me was checking in for their appointment too. And it was obvious he was a smoker. And that guy, very smelly. Very smelly. So smelly. He smelled of cigarette smoke. So smelly. I did take a step to the side so that he would be less pungent. That I wouldn't smell him as much, because he was really a potent smell. I can't imagine the social structures, the social problems that guy must have. I mean, if people can't even be within a certain perimeter of you, 3 or 5 feet without, just having trouble managing their sense of smell, I don't know what that could do to your social life. I know that a lot of people say that, they started smoking to be involved in the local social group, a circle of friends, say, who are smokers. But I can only imagine that those are the only people you have after you've smoked out all the other non-smokers. Who else is there? Who are the people who are willing to hang around the odors that you are emitting? So, no doubt to some extent, from a social perspective, that's what reinforces people to continue smoking because their circle of friends, the only circle of friends they have, are the ones who are willing to sort of accept those smells in your circle. So, oh man. So talk about a serious impact. So back on topic. The topic is alcohol and addictive substances, including caffeine. And so I was talking about the barrier to entry. So there are quite a number of barriers to entry to get involved in these addictive substances. First of all, you have to be willing to smell like them. I worked in a library one time, and I had a coworker who was clearly an alcoholic, and he would reek too. He would totally smell. The alcohol would just sort of be, yeah, he would reek too. The alcohol that he would drink during the day would just, I mean, you would only need to get like within 3 feet of him, and you could smell the whatever he was drinking, whether it was gin or whatever. You could smell it. So I'm talking about this in the sense of barriers to entry. Well, first of all, there's the cost, right? Alcohol costs money. There's barriers to entry in that you've got to learn to enjoy the substance. You know, I actually did experiment with smoking a cigarette one time. It was rough. I smelled so bad. It was not a good experience. You know, there's a barrier to entry. I mean, there's costs. There's costs to your pocketbook. It doesn't necessarily taste good. It's not that enjoyable to start off with quite often. Now, there are some aspects of alcohol that are enjoyable. Like I remember when I was growing up, wine coolers were really popular, and I could imagine drinking wine coolers a lot. But wine coolers were not that different from just regular soda pop, and regular soda pop was less expensive. So I'm talking about barriers to entry. There are a lot of barriers to entry. I mean, even coffee, which I really enjoy. It's very easy to get decaffeinated coffee, and it's the same cost as caffeinated coffee. And so you can have that enjoyment today with some, with some drinks and not have to pay an extra price. Anyway, I was talking about barriers to entry. Anyway, I just want to say that there are barriers to entry to these addictive substances. And here's another barrier. They're generally unhealthy habits. They are an extra source of calories. And for a lot of people, they are a source of weight gain. And it's part of their diet that contributes to their being overweight. And, there definitely has to be some kind of balance. It's clearly a choice, but I think it's a kind of choice that can get out of control really quickly. It can be self-reinforcing. I mean, if all you do for fun is drink, then the only people who will be hanging out with you are your drinking buddies. And being with your drinking buddies will reinforce the drinking behavior, just like smoking. And what's also interesting is, at least for nicotine and ethanol, both of these substances essentially promote cancer. Now, I'm not saying that ethanol is a carcinogen, because it's not. But when ethanol gets processed in your liver, there is a substance that is produced, like a byproduct of that processing, which does promote cancer and is a carcinogen. I think it's ethylaldehyde. I think it might be ethylaldehyde. So, your liver is trying to protect your body by breaking down the ethanol. And while doing so, it creates a substance that's a carcinogen in your body. And so people who drink alcohol have higher rates of cancer, breast cancer being one of them. And anyway, I just wanted to convey this information to you about the barriers of entry, sort of the unhealthful activity resulting that is involved with using cigarettes or alcohol. And I just want to, when it comes to and of course there's this addictive property where, in order to get the same good feeling, you have to take more of it in the future. And these are just all, as you can tell, the way I'm describing it, they're just no good points to make about these substances. And for me, it's very easy just to not use them. my social skills are so developed that I can be effective in almost any social environment, and I don't need alcohol. Not in the least. In fact, I've noticed, like when I was in college, when I did drink alcohol, that I slowed down. I sort of, I mellowed out. And in fact, I also kind of became quieter. I was not my typical extroverted self in a party setting or a group setting. So actually, alcohol made me less effective in social environments. My social skills were degraded. I found that my social skills were degraded, and in general, I had less fun while drinking alcohol at parties when I was in college. So I put these pieces together over time. The cost, how it didn't taste that great, how it inhibited my social skill. It causes cancer. There's so many negatives associated with alcohol. It just didn't make sense, even if it was promoted by the culture. Even if it was promoted by the party culture and the culture of the college students. So it just didn't make any sense. And so I never really indulged. And of course, the same was true with cigarettes. I gave cigarettes a try, did not like it. In fact, I think I smoked half of one cigarette one time as an experiment because I just wanted to check it out. And I had to take all the clothes I was wearing and put them in a plastic bag and tie a knot around it so those clothes would not stink in my college dormitory. They smelled so bad. So, these experiences, I hope these experiences convey to you, and these ideas convey to you some of the reasons that smoking and drinking are just not healthful behaviors, and not useful, and also not helpful. Not healthful, not helpful either. And the fact that they're a detriment to your pocketbook and other things, they really just don't make sense to me. So I did want to mention this. There's another aspect of it. One of the things that I enjoy in my life, one thing I get a lot of satisfaction from, are my efforts at self-care. Now, an effort at self-care for me involves, promoting healthful behaviors like exercising and eating right. It turns out that drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes is not promoting a healthful behavior. In fact, just from a health standpoint, I remember reading a statistic saying that people who are regular smokers cut their average lifespan by 10 years. That's right, they lose a decade of their lives because of this choice to smoke. So imagine that you're going to live 80 years old, and you have a choice to smoke or not to smoke. And if you choose to smoke, on average, your lifespan will decline by 10 years. So instead of living to 80, the ripe old age of 80, you'll only live to the ripe old age of 70. Just for the pleasure, the so-called pleasure of smoking. And it just is an equation that does not make sense. It just does not balance out. Losing an entire decade of life is rough. And not to mention even the social exclusion involved in it. And, there, at least in California, in the state of California, smoking is not looked well upon. It's looked at in a very dim light. And in fact, at least at my workplace, there are places where smokers go to hang out to do their smoking. And it's not necessarily, typically these places are out of doors. And if it's cold or windy outside, it's kind of a drag to stand out there, 50 feet away from a building and do the smoking. It just doesn't make sense. Now, I also have this sense that I'm preaching to the choir already. I have a feeling that you already know this. But I also want to reinforce the choir as your father. I want to give you some insight. Now, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you about the choices that I've made and also the choices I'm proud of. Here's another thing. I have had friends who were alcoholics, and I've seen them and their health over time just get eradicated. They're basically, their health just it plummets. They become unhappy and depressed. They gain weight. And here's the thing. Why even put yourself in the position where you might be a statistic? That is, why put yourself in a position where it's even possible for you to have an addiction to some substance and put yourself at risk that way? Television and movies are rife. That is, they have a lot of examples of people who are suffering from addiction to alcohol. And there's that same old story of people being addicted and getting addicted at controlling and taking over their lives, and then they go sober. And then, they talk about how they've been sober for 10 years or clean for 2 years or whatever. Why even put yourself in a position where where you have to tell that story to people? I prefer a different narrative. A narrative of effectiveness in the world, enjoyment, intelligence. I want to be remembered for that narrative, and not this narrative where I was addicted and got clean again. And my guess is that you want the same. And so anyway, like I said, I just want to reinforce it. There are elements in our society, and I want to bring this to your attention, that are what I'd call drug accepting communities. There's a lot of drug acceptance in our society, and I want to caution you on drug acceptance. First of all, I want to say that I am a libertarian when it comes to drug acceptance. And I'm all for other people taking whatever drugs they want to take. It's their life. And they can do in their own home, in their own living room, whatever it is they want to do. And so I'm willing to offer this kind of freedom to other people. In fact, I invite them to take advantage of that freedom, to take whatever substances they want to take. And at the same time, I recognize my freedom not to take those substances, and to take no substances, and to sort of emphatically not take those substances. So it's an interesting dichotomy, but it's a consistent worldview. It's a worldview that offers freedom and invites anybody to take whatever substances they want to. And at the same time, I'm deciding not to take any in an emphatic way, because I want to preserve my health and happiness, my economic position, my position when it comes to mental and physical health. So as you can see, I've got a lot to say about it. It's something I'm passionate about. Now, I recognize you may take this with a grain of salt. I mean, you may take this advice. It's not really advice. It's really just a description of my experience. It's also an explanation. It's an explanation for sort of my behavior. And I hope that it's somewhat emphatic and that it's somewhat convincing. I hope to convey some kind of, I hope to be a little bit convincing. So anyway, so on a scale from 1 to 10, when it comes to alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, particularly street drugs. Now, I will take drugs prescribed by a doctor. Here's the reason why drugs prescribed by a doctor make sense. Well, first of all, doctors first of all, it's evidence-based. Evidence-based medicine is the way to go. And if you want to improve health outcomes, taking prescribed drugs and prescribed substances makes sense under the guidance of a knowledgeable person. So that's really the distinction right there. The problem with street drugs is that it's unregulated. There's no evidence that is available that describes the healthful effects in ways that evidence that's repeatable. And the goal isn't necessarily more healthful behaviors. Let me tell you a little bit about, there are friends I have who openly take drugs. And that's true in the world today. There's an acceptance of drug culture in the world, and it's just the way of the world right now. And I applaud that. I appreciate the freedom that people get. But here is actually part of the reasoning that some of my friends engage in drug taking. And the reason has to do with personal growth. It has to do with, now I'm also an advocate for personal growth, a strong advocate. Personal growth is one thing that's very important to me. In fact, look at this. I'm even reading a book this big about the story of psychology to get more insights into personal growth and personal development. These things are really important to me. Now, a lot of people think that drugs are an avenue towards greater personal development. And they're right. They're right. They are an avenue towards personal development. I don't deny that at all. Though what I do think is this. I think the personal development that results from drug taking is exaggerated. I think it's exaggerated. Its utility, drug taking's utility as a tool for personal development is exaggerated. Now, and you know what? Nearly anything can be a tool for personal development. For example, I can just practice meditation sitting in the middle of my room with my eyes closed. That is a tool for personal development. In the same way, drug taking is just a different tool. And look, I appreciate and honor drug taking as a tool for personal development. Though I also think there are more effective ways to go about personal development. I have a feeling that drug taking as a tool for personal development is, say, this effective, and other methods are even more effective. The problem with drug taking as a tool for personal development is that it is risky. You're risking your health, you're risking your finances, sometimes they risk their jobs. If you get busted, you're spending time in jail and more opportunity to meditate in a jail cell. Sure. So, and there are experiences, one-of-a-kind experiences that drug takers will have, and I accept that. And I also think it has limited potential for explosive personal growth, like huge levels of personal growth. Here's the thing. The friends that I have that take drugs, when they tell me about their drug-taking experiences, they talk in glowing terms, sometimes glowing terms about their drug-taking experiences. They also talk in dim terms about their drug-taking experiences. There's good trips, bad trips, right? You learn from both of them, of course. though there's that caution, that's a cautionary tale there, that I have a feeling that there are probably more bad experiences than good. And that really there's a cultural positivity related to, or acceptance of drug taking, that somehow is exaggerating the benefits of drug taking. Anyway, my point though is that these people who have these positive experiences, when they have them, I ask about the kind of personal growth that's happened. Can they describe in words their experiences, in words that detail the insights that they gained from taking these substances? And what I find invariably is that the wisdom acquired is trivial. So they might say, oh, I felt separated from my body. I was in an out-of-body experience, or maybe, and I'm stereotyping this a little bit, but it really is about, this is about what they're saying. They're saying, I really got a sense of what reality is at its base. And, I figured out, it's amazing how much of my life is rooted in my body. And I learned about my mind, and I separated. I really am trying to do my best at sort of conveying what they say are the personal growth details that they're learning. And let me tell you, I have not, even from one experience, from one sort of discussion or conversation with these drug takers, not once have I noted a point that is of any great significance in terms of personal growth. Not one. I have not come across any one person with an experience walking away from taking substances, coming up with personal growth ideas that are powerful and might be an incentive for more drug taking. There is not one unique idea. Now that might be an exaggeration. I know Michael Pollan has a new book out about drug taking, and I haven't read it yet. And I think he was taking some psychotropic drug, I'm not sure. But I might have to read this book, and maybe Michael Pollan. Now, Michael Pollan is a prominent nonfiction writer, and who I admire. And I wonder if he has much to say about substance taking and sort of the personal growth that he went through when taking these substances. I also have another person who I admire. What's his name? I'm forgetting it. But he is also an advocate of drug taking substances for the purpose of personal growth. And I also haven't read his book. So, wouldn't it be nice? Maybe I ought to read these people's books and sort of get more insight into the sort of spiritual and personal development insights that they gained. Maybe these amazing writers will be able to convey to me what it is explicitly that they learned. And here's the thing. If they can't sort of bring back from the edge what they learned, which was significant and substantial, then I think I'm likely to discount it. I want them to go off into the territory and come back with something valuable. I am looking for insights. Looking for integrations. I'm looking for concepts that are abstract and useful and help me be more effective and happy in my life. And I only wish that I knew of people who went on that journey of substance taking and came back with something really valuable to contribute. What I do notice is that their lives tend to go into general areas of decline, at least from a distance. I noticed that. So, or you know what? No decline. Sometimes they're doing just fine, and that's fine. But here's the thing. It's a little bit risky. You know, there are a lot of ways to engage in personal growth. Sports and outdoor activity, hiking. Hiking is risky. Skiing is risky. Mountain climbing is risky. And I think there's a lot of personal growth that can come from developing those skills in those various sports. So I recognize that risk is also inherent in personal growth. It's part of what makes personal growth so valuable. The possibility that you might have loss in your life. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that when it comes to substance taking, that a person may be taking risks and may not gather much material as insight. Just a possibility. That's my suspicion. It's my suspicion, and I'm letting you know about it. Anyway, let's get back to the questions. We tend to have taken a serious turn right there. Well, as you can tell, I'm passionate about the subject. And for me, I get personal growth in all kinds of ways, through my relationships, through my education, through my exercise, through my work. And, believe it or not, these are really great ways to learn about yourself. And they involve no inordinate risk. Okay, and almost no cost. Okay, next question. Question number 344, have you had a bad addiction to anything? And the answer is no. Question number 345, describe your worst date so far. My worst date. Well, I did have a date one time. We met using a dating app, and we met for coffee at a coffee house in Pismo Beach. And, I don't want to get into too much detail, but we had a pleasant time together. We spent about an hour and 20 minutes discussing over coffee. But, and this is actually not a bad date. I don't have a lot of bad date stories. I just don't happen to hang around people where even bad date stories like that are possible. Which is good, because I think I screen them out pretty well. But it was just a kind of date where the other person spoke about themselves a lot and was over-focused on their work throughout the conversation, and the conversation never got any better. The conversation was really just them talking about their work. And for me, that's a bad date. Okay, next question. Question number 346. Have you been slapped in the face? No, I don't think I ever have. Question number 347. Have you been in a fight? Have you been in a fight? No, I haven't. But actually, I did get into a tussle with my best friend when I was in middle school. He was bugging me on purpose. We were in the middle school. This was happening in middle school. We were in the men's bathroom, and I was just using the bathroom. And my friend was bugging me. He was tapping me on the shoulder, pushing me. And I kind of rushed him. He was my best friend. Basically, I kind of pushed him away. And we continued to hang out. We were just roughhousing. And I guess that's as close to a fight as I've ever been in. It's just roughhousing as a kid in middle school. Okay, so that's the kind of fight that I've been in. Question number 348. Do you have or have you had a lawyer? And no, I haven't had a lawyer, and no, I don't have a lawyer. Question number 349. Are you a fan of pickup lines? And no, I'm not. Well, anyway, I guess I'm just going to wrap this up. I just want to say thank you for spending some time with me, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for taking the time to get to know me a little bit better and figure out where I'm coming from when it comes to substance taking. And I hope you have a wonderful day today, a wonderful day on your vacation, and a wonderful day day after tomorrow during Thanksgiving. And I'm going to be thinking about you, and I'm going to be listening and learning and reading about Harry Potter's Wizarding World. And I'm actually looking forward to one of these days going to Universal Studios and going to the Harry Potter venue. So I don't know if you have any interest in doing that, going down to Universal Studios and checking out Harry Potter's Wizarding World. Give me a ring. All right. I'll talk to you later, girl. I love you. Peace.